Welcome, everyone, to EWA Podcast Week. It's been way too long since you've heard my voice talking to members of the EWA universe. So myself and Bryce put together a nice little EWA Podcast Week for everyone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the kickoff.
You're looking at the real deal now. Gonna kick this sorry ass out on the street. What you got? You used to think you owned the street. We'll pack these bags and your ass is dead meat. Victory is sweet. Here's your receipt.
Welcome, everyone, to EWA Podcast Week. It is I, Craig. I am back with a vengeance, and I'm here today with, I guess, a special guest. He's pretty much like every other guest to me. It's his second time on the podcast. He's
It's
catching
Steve!
up. That's right. No, Steve will never be on this podcast, not even during podcast week. But I want to welcome Newt back to the podcast. Newt, welcome to the podcast. Again, great to have you.
It's good to be back on the podcast.
And I know what you're all
Long
thinking.
delayed.
I know what they're all thinking right now. They're thinking, oh, this is going to be really good. It's going to be just like the last one. We're going to get answers to questions. I don't want to give them any of that.
I agree. They've had enough.
Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah.
No, a lot of stuff has happened since the last time we had you on the podcast. We've gone through a great summer, one of the best stretches of the EWA that I've seen in the time that I've been here. And, of course, we're leading up to Collision Course, and the road to Super Brawl has started. Newt, you've been around this for a long time. How would you rate the last 6 or 7 months of activity as far as the rest of the EWA's history has been lately?
I don't know. I think the last 6 or 7 months, boy, that's a long stretch, but I would say the last 6 months maybe have been pretty good. I mean, realistically, we've had although you've had the same sort of handful of people at the top of the card, I think you always get that to some degree. And I think there has been a little bit of variety in there. I was thinking about it the other day. We had the weird kind of little section where TZ kind of did his own thing for a little bit, and it's kind of weird that he's just gone, and that I feel like that didn't really make an impact that he's gone, and I guess that is a little strange to me. But
does it bother you that he is just kind of up and gone now?
No, because that's what I was saying when I was thinking about it, like everybody was really afraid of how good he was and what he was doing, but at the same time, and this is not a slam on TZ by any means.
No.
It's like it's just weird that when he pulled out, it really didn't have an effect on the Fed, and I guess that. To me, it seemed like maybe he wasn't, I don't know, doing enough when he was there or something. I don't know. See, that seems like a slam, but it's not intended that way. It's just strange to me. I was thinking of it the other day that everybody, like, it was almost like that was a pause between kind of the stories that we had going on. You know what I mean? Kurt Angle coming to power, getting kicked out. Right. Like, I guess it didn't just have a great effect, his run at the top, and that's...
Right, it almost kind of felt like it was, like, independent from the rest of the happenings in the EWA.
Right, so, I mean, I would say that was a little strange, but while that was going on, to the credit, I guess, of everybody else, the rest of the card was really interesting as well, so I guess, to some extent, maybe it was good that he wasn't overbearing the card, and so that other people could do stuff in the middle and lower card, I guess, so...
Right, I mean, the national title scene got really competitive in the summer.
Right.
A lot of guys stepped up. A lot of people were fighting over that title, and it became it was fun to watch different people stake their claim and rise up to that level. So, I mean, it has its pros as well as its cons. You mentioned something there that you were thinking about TZ's reign just the other day. I want to ask you this. In your personal life, when you're not on the EWA website, how much do you think about the EWA and what's going on and what you'd like to do and where it's heading?
Not a ton. I'm hearing myself in the background. Sorry. But I mean, it does come up when I'm just, and I don't know what brought the Teasy thing, but I guess I was thinking about all the people that had left, and it's unavoidable for me to not have some of that stuff bouncing around in my head and ideas, popping around in my head or whatever, just because I'm just entrenched in it all the time.
Right. What do you think about the most though? Like, you would think about like storylines and where you want to see them head. Do you think about like cool pay-per-view concepts? Do you think about match results and match ideas? Like, what do you spend your time thinking about whenever you're just like basically daydreaming about the EWA?
when I'm daydreaming about the EWA,
it's always Steve in his small hand.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's mostly just me and Steve in sexual positions. I think he can get that whole little hand up my ass.
All of our asses.
Yes. No, probably storylines and stuff. I mean, I like that kind of stuff. I don't really think a ton about. Well, I mean, I guess that's not true. I think about like storylines in matches. I don't really think about writing. I have nightmares about writing matches, but so I think about maybe storyline elements of a match coming up and something that I think could be interesting that could happen, or a cool finish might pop into my head or whatever, and I'm like, I got to find a way to use that, or storyline suggestions or that sort of thing. And then to that extent, maybe sometimes some kind of pay-per-view concept or a match that would be interesting at the pay-per-view. Just people, we can match these guys up because they've both been, moving up the card and doing some good things or whatever. But, I mean, it kind of depends on what's been going on, so.
Have you ever thought of like a match ending or a match concept that never came to fruition but you kind of wish it would have?
I'm sure I have. It seemed like there was something a while back. But it's just one of these things that, of course, now I can't remember what it was. It seemed like there was something, and it was something I just held on to, and then eventually something worked out. It was like, we can do that I've been setting, in the back of my mind. Well, even actually the suicide thing was an idea I've had in my head for a long time. Not really relating to suicide, mind you, but...
This is an intervention now.
Right, yeah. Been thinking about killing myself a lot, and no... somebody coming back under a mask, do that whole little thing. And so an opportunity just presented itself, and it was like, this would be perfect. We could use that. So sometimes there are ideas that I have that, they don't work at the time, but you just say, okay, we'll put that on the shelf. And
right.
I mean, it's not like I don't write them down or anything. They're just in my brain, I guess.
But you don't want anybody to see them. So.
Right.
That was a perfect situation, you speaking on the suicide situation there in the EWA. How long after, this is probably a question for Bryce, but I'll go ahead and ask you, how long after Angle's loss to CM Punk did you wait to reach out to him with this idea?
I think he reached out to me about he wasn't sure where to go or what to do. Because I wasn't in on him putting up his career or whatever. Like, that wasn't a plan to do the suicide thing or whatever. Like, I don't even recall. I don't think they even ran that by me. Like, I read that, like, when I was reading the card or something that Bryce had put up Kurt Angle's career. And then I think he, was like, what do I do now or whatever? How do I get Angle back into eventually? But he wanted to take a break from him. And then it was like, but, we should probably work on something eventually to get him back. And almost immediately, like I said, I think the suicide thing had been kind of in the back of my head. And so it was like, you could do, a masked thing where you came back. And I'm like, suicide would work for that because he's a legitimate character that's masked and nobody knows, as opposed to, creating Wrestler X or whatever that come off a little cheesy. And there's not a lot of masked wrestlers that are well known. And, of course, he wears a full bodysuit and everything, so it's perfect for, sticking Angle under there. So almost, I think, immediately we come up with that idea.
What was it like what was it like for you to watch that story progress and watch people's reactions to this sim person on the forum and the suicide character and the role plays that Bryce was writing?
Well, I don't usually like to be in on those kind of things, but like almost immediately, I think it was Steve or something, because Bryce didn't capitalize his fucking letters in the EWA, and Steve almost immediately, I mean, it was like his first RP or something. Steve's on there like, this is an old guy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, damn it, Bryce, you've already screwed this up. And then like Bryce, I guess, was like giving him crap over the PM. So then Steve is, coming at me, and it's like, well, what's this guy doing? And so I had to kind of like, almost immediately, I'm like managing this. Guy
so
with
you had to say to Steve, listen, if I give you the tag titles, will you just back off this situation?
Yeah, I was like, what's it going to take for you not to spoil this? No, no, I think I gave it to Steve, and it's true, because this happens a lot. I say this to people. I was like, it's a new guy, so don't poke the new guys too much, with a stick or whatever.
Really? Would you say that about Fandango last week?
No, the Fandango thing, I know everybody thinks that was some kind of a joke, and maybe it was. Maybe somebody was, I don't know. It didn't come up as anybody I knew, but I thought it would be good just to have a jobber, right? Because, I mean, I knew he wasn't going to do any good, but I thought if he posted little halfway decent RPs, and we'd keep him around as a jobber, and it would be at least interesting because he'd be legitimate, and maybe by osmosis he would learn to RP better, but he was really annoying. He was sending me annoying PMs and stuff. He had to go. He was bad.
He sent us all annoying PMs. See, I think he really thought I was going to ban him from the shout box because he stopped.
Yeah, he stopped after that. So I still got to delete his account. I just banned him for 9 million days or something. So.
He'll be back. Eventually, he'll be back.
I like to never. They have an option where you do, like permanent ban. I just like to ban them for like a really long, ridiculous amount of time.
They can still come back and see the forum then.
Yeah. I mean, he can. I think he can still see stuff. He just can't post. He can't PM. He can't do anything. So I wanted him to see that we were kicking him out.
Oh, well, that's very nice of you. We're a public community. It's like a public shaming.
Yeah.
Like the scarlet letter he wears now. Going kind of in line with that Fandango thing and annoying people. Let me take that back. Like annoying one another. At times in the EWA, even though we're all kind of in that adult range, disagreements and feuds happen. Right. And not like character feuds. We're talking like people having personal problems with each other. As we saw in the Slam feedback thread this week, people, there are feelings involved, and there are a lot of hard work involved for some people, and, sometimes losses are tough to take, and, comments get said, and things get said, and people don't really particularly enjoy each other's comments at times. I'm really dancing around people just disliking each other.
Right.
But what's that like for you as... we all kind of look to you as the person in charge, but you sign on, you see these people bickering back and forth. What goes through your mind whenever you see people in the Fed having issues with one another?
Well, I guess it's strange to me in some respect. I mean, like, I don't even know what the hell was going on in the Slam thread. Like I said, it was kind of interesting because people were actually having some really, I guess, in-depth feedback, but then, like, along come snide remarks to one another, and I'm not... And I wasn't even aware that some of these people maybe didn't like each other or just whatever, they were all on the wrong side of the bed that day. So from that outsider looking in kind of perspective, it seems strange to me that everybody doesn't just get along happy, joy. But the flip side of that is historically nobody's ever gotten along in EWA, so it doesn't really surprise me. I would say tensions are a lot less than they've probably ever been before. So realistically, we've come a long way.
And I think that has to do with things like this podcast.
I think it has to do with me running the Fed mostly now.
Also that, yeah. And then things like the Raw chats on Monday night. These people, we get to know one another, and we get to talking, and we find things that we have in common. Like I've said in previous podcasts, you put a voice with the name, it's a lot easier to potentially get along with that person. That being said, not everyone still gets along. I mean, Ed and I did a podcast.
Right. Well, I think it's beyond even just the more community things that we've had now. A lot of it is a lot of these people have been around for a long time, and so in some respects that I guess makes you a little jaded to some people because you say, oh, well, that's how so-and-so always acts. But the flip side of that is you kind of know how they act and you know their interactions, so you're less likely to butt heads with them all the time, you know what I mean? Whereas if you've got a kind of influx of people where it's rotating pretty often, then I think you see more of people bickering and stuff. So I think we're in a pretty good place, I mean, overall. But, you know, a lot of times it's just misunderstandings. I mean, there's been times where people thought I hated them and vice versa, and then I ended up being able to work really good programs with those people, and it turns out, you know, we're creative differences, so. Right.
I think we might have touched on this in your last podcast, but have you ever just, like, had someone that they rubbed you the wrong way, that you just didn't get along with them, but you kind of had to because of the position that you're in within the EWA?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, and there's a lot of that, you know. I guess even still now, there's certain things that people do that just annoy me, but for the most part, I don't get too bothered by it, especially now. It's just like, at this point, I've been running it long enough that you know what I'm doing. I'm going to do it this way. Not to say that people can't say stuff and it wouldn't, you know, aggravate me or whatever, but I kind of just put it out of my head, and at this point, people kind of know how I'm running things, and they either like it or they don't, and I've always been, you know, if you don't like it, there's the door, so.
Right.
That's never been a concern of mine, so.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that I think you do well here is, you know, you've always been open and communicative with not just myself, but with everyone who has reached out to you, and you're always willing to answer questions, no matter the ludicrousy of the question. You are always generally willing to answer the question. That being said, another positive about you running the Fed and the results that you do is your ability to incorporate storylines and things that happen in role plays within the matches. That also was evidence in the feedback thread this week, and evidence in the Cody Rhodes Xavier Woods match against the Wyatt family this week. Incorporated a lot of things that were said and done in both sets of role plays by both teams. That being said, on average, how long does it take you to read all the role plays that are written for any given week?
Oh, you know, that really varies because it really depends on the week and how often people role play. I you know, in a perfect world, I would read them when they first get posted up, and I would really absorb them and maybe go back and read them again. A lot of times what happens is, especially this week we had that, but it kind of really happens almost every week within reason. You get a lot of RPs Saturday night, and so you just, it's impossible for me to have really soaked that in as much as one that's posted on a Monday. But then again, you know, sometimes I'm so busy that I don't have time to read it on a Monday, so I may not get to them until I'm getting ready to start you know, figuring out who's winning and putting together the matches and stuff. So I understand why they end up being late, because sometimes I don't have time to do it either.
Right.
But, you know, you can spend hours on there, and then, you know, it's tough. A lot of times I'll write a match and I still won't know who's winning. And I've already read the RPs a couple of times, and I go back and I look at them. With the tag title match this week, I went back and looked at those RPs a ton. I mean, ridiculous amount of times, even after I decided on a finish and I wrote it up, and then I went back, and I went back and I looked it again, and I was like, you know, is this what I want to do? Could we tweak this? Could we do this? You know, so I mean, it really depends on the matches and what's going on, but it could be hours sometimes on one match, especially if I'm writing the match along with it, you know, and going back and re-reviewing it. Probably if you took the full time that I've been looking at those RPs, you probably over an hour or so on big matches. You know, not on this. Obviously, I'm not deliberating on smaller ones that long because I never.
Are you currently role playing in an eFed somewhere right now? You don't have to name it. Just are you?
No, I am not currently doing anything. I got to admit I have a little bit of a bug to do something, but I don't I haven't figured anything out. So Rex and I were talking about that the other day because we did our little segment for the 2 Under Slam, and we had fun doing that, and we discussed that was fun, and that we hadn't done anything in a long time. So,
would you ever, or have you ever made an EWA character while you've been the one in charge?
I can't say that I've done that to my knowledge. I can't really remember all the times I've been in charge.
Yeah.
But, it probably wouldn't be out of the realm, but I wouldn't. It's always a tough road to negotiate, because even if you're fair, people won't think you are, and how fair can you be, and what can you do, and
you would really have to make yourself a jobber, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and to some extent, yeah, depending on what you were doing, unless you're just, you'd have to really pick your spots carefully, let me put it that way, so.
Yeah. Especially, you could probably do it secretly, but if someone found out that... Right. Yeah, that would probably...
if you guys find out that I'm Bryce, you're probably going to have issues with it, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, that would be bad. Now, if we find out you're Fandango...
Yes. I did do that a long time ago in a Fed, though. I want to say it was like probably the first Fed I ever ran. I was in it and running it at the same time, and I think I was pretty fair, but
no one ever will think that. As long as you're in both positions.
But nobody really, and it didn't help that I was, one of the top guys. So I
want to switch gears and talk about a specific thing that happened a while ago.
All right.
I want to go back to Lethal Lottery back in May.
Oh God. Okay.
And there was the Grand Slam Championship match between CM Punk and Diamond Dallas Page.
Yes.
And the result came out, and CM Punk won. And then I want to kind of go from there. I want to know what went through your head when you went through the feedback for that, and you read replies that were kind of like, "Wow, I really thought Page had this," or "I can't believe, Punk pulled this out," or "It's surprising to me." It was kind of not overwhelmingly in favor of Page, but I think a lot of people were passive-aggressively disagreeing with the choice that you made.
Right.
And what was your reaction to seeing that kind of feedback?
Let me give you an example here. The example you gave me, I remember that, but I got to be honest, it's vague. But that's happened. It happened not that long ago. So I know what you're talking about, and I can get there without specifically saying, "Oh, I remember the thing happening with."
Oh yeah, if you have another example.
No, with the Bryce match not that long ago. Several people come in and was like, "Oh, I thought the other guy had it. I don't even remember who he was fighting now." But anyway.
Oh yeah, the Val Venus King of the Ring match.
There you go. And so there have been times where, like that one is different because a little bit of a different example because I feel 100% I made the right call in that, and that's not to slam anybody who has a different opinion, because obviously it's all based on opinions, right? But in that one, everybody was over on the left and I was on the right, and I still, at the end of it, I looked at everybody on the left and I still said, they missed it, but I got it right. But there have been that was a unique instance where I don't think everybody was looking at things from the same set of eyes that I'm looking at them from. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes a difference. The DDP match, like I said, I don't remember as clearly, but I remember that was a really tough decision for me. So sometimes you go back and you say, damn, did I make the wrong call on that? You know what I mean? Whereas the other one, the Val Venus match, I was puzzled that everybody was on the opposite side, but I still always felt like I saw the right outcome in that. And I saw why people would think it was close, so you expect some people to be on the opposite side of that, because that's just, always going to be that way. But there have been times where you kind of wonder, did I get it wrong? But
did everyone see something that I didn't?
Right? Did everybody see something that I didn't see? And like I said, the most recent one, like I feel like I saw something that nobody else saw, and so I felt good afterwards. As weird as it is, I was like, I understand to some extent while everybody didn't expect that result, but I think if they were sitting in my shoes, they would see what I had saw, and it would be different. But there are times where I don't have that. That one I felt like there was a really justified means to my reasoning, and sometimes you don't have that, and so then you say, damn, maybe I made the wrong call. But especially if it's on one you went back and forth on a couple of times, you know.
Yeah. What leads to the match results that are like count out or DQ, especially the title matches, where there's a winner, but the title doesn't change hands? What's usually going through your mind with those kinds of results?
I try not to do a whole lot of those. There was,
and you haven't done a whole lot of them. But
no, I mean, but they do pop up. One, I think you have to leave everything on the table as a option, because if you don't, where's the fun in that? I mean, you know, we have alternate ways of winning, and I think just as a booker, just completely unrelated to an EFED, you've got to use that stuff because you have it. You know what I mean? You got those in your arsenal. You should use them when you can. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, there's always going to be a clean finish. You know, people complain about the dusty finish or whatever, but it works, and you should be able to use it. Just don't overuse it. You know.
Right.
And it's a little different here because people are working, you know, to get the victories and so on and so forth. But it just depends on what's going on and if there's a legitimate reason to do that. So if it's a close match and it seems like somebody has maybe earned the win or maybe didn't earn the win, but the other guy kind of dropped the ball a little bit, but not enough to, say, take the title away from him or whatever, right? It's like, this was really close, and if I had to really make a call, this guy won, but he didn't put in a championship winning performance because he didn't have to, or this other guy stumbled a little bit, but not enough to necessarily take the belt off of him, so we can use one of our kind of unique finishes and see where that takes us. You know,
is it more of a case of these guys didn't win so much as this guy lost?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, it depends on the situation, but sometimes it's a situation like that where it's, you know, somebody didn't win, but this guy didn't really lose either, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, that's tough because people have a tendency to, myself included, you know, we take this pretty seriously. Right. And the losses are losses and the wins are, you know, high points. How does that affect you whenever you're writing results? I know it doesn't affect your decision making, but how does it affect you as you're posting a show going,
well, I mean,
this guy's going to be devastated?
Yeah, I hate that. And there are people I know that it's like, I'm going to make this decision and I'm calling it, and this guy may not be here tomorrow morning because I've made that decision. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I know that, and it's like, man, this guy's really solid. But the way I always look at it is, you know, he's either there and he's not, and if he's not, then it was going to bound to happen eventually anyway. You know what I mean? How dependable is somebody if they're going to quit when they lose? And if it's, I feel like the only time you should ever quit when you lose is when you've really been just completely boned. And I think most everybody operates at a level at EWA where you can't say you've lost to somebody that just completely did not deserve it at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even if you think you beat them and you can point to a lot of different reasons why you beat them, surely the other guy has put in enough effort. You know, it would be like losing to Fandango or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be a case of, well, there's no way that guy beat me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I can see getting upset with that. But I mean, most of the big matches around here are pretty tight, and even, you know, weekly matches a lot of times are pretty tight in terms of competition. So if you're losing, you're probably losing to somebody pretty good, and even if you don't think you should have lost, you've still lost to somebody pretty good most times. So, you know, but it is frustrating, and I've posted that a while back on one of the shows. It was like, man, every match on this card was really tough, and it sucks because even the people that lost put in some fantastic work, and it's like, even if you jive the card around a little bit, and if this guy had been facing this guy, he would have beat him, you know what I mean? But instead he was facing that guy and he lost to him, and so it gets a little frustrating. And sometimes after I'm done with the show, I'm like, oh, here it is. God help us, you know?
Yeah. Do you like do you kind of wince or cringe whenever you click that feedback thread because you don't know what you're going to get every time you open it?
Well, I'm always curious. I mean, I got to be honest. For the most part, people are good. We haven't had a lot of like just outbursts or anything. I should have won, but you can always tell when somebody's like when you see that they've read the show and then they went to the feedback thread and then they don't post for 2 or 3 days. You know that they're stewing and they've decided to wait and post something. And Bryce never did post feedback, I think, on the last pay-per-view, which I thought was interesting. Not that I think he was aggravated at all, but
yeah, that was a different situation that people didn't see coming. That was certainly a different angle to use. As the storyline became prevalent throughout the weeks leading up to the show and during the show, you kind of see the writing on the wall and where things were going. But
yeah, and that was definitely not a call I wanted to make, but it was a situation where pretty much I don't like to do vacated titles and stuff that often, and Bryce pretty much told me I'm not going to be able to be around. So it's like, okay, then we'll write something in there and we'll make it clever enough that we can get the belt off of you. Because obviously, if I'd have known that going into the month, we'd have just made a title match, and he'd have intended to lose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been the simple solution, but it was kind of a thing that come up sort of last minute, and you try to make the best of it, and so that's what we did. And of course, it makes a nice little surprise for the show.
Indeed.
I was writing the show, and I had 99% of it, except for the last little bit, done, and I knew that Sir had been in there peeking at it, and I thought, and I had made a post, well, I got to do a couple little things, and then I'll post up the show, but I was already running behind it. I thought, Sir's going to go in there, and he's going to post that show up. He's just going to be like, oh, I posted it up for you, and I'm not going to have that title switch, and I thought for sure that was going to happen, but thankfully it didn't, so.
And I don't think any of us would have been surprised. Well, except for maybe the people in the title match, and Bryce for sure if he'd have read that the way it was.
Bryce didn't know that was going down either. I mean, to be fair,
okay.
He suggested a few different things, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." So I like to even leave the people. I mean, I wrote everything on that show actually, all the segments, everything, all the interactions. I did all that because nobody sent anything, and I needed to get.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Oh wait. You didn't send anything in, did you? Anyway,
you know how I feel about segments.
I needed to get from point A to point B, so I just sort of established everything myself, and we got there. So,
well, I think Return of the Living Damned was one of those shows where going in, everyone was like, this is just going to kind of be like, Slam 1.5, like it's going to, but then it winds up being like an amazing show from start to finish and great matches all around, and you're like, wow, like that was really solid pay-per-view. Like it just kind of came out of nowhere. Do you take that into consideration when writing it, or does it just kind of happen on its own that these pay-per-views become a bigger spectacle or a bigger deal than we anticipate them being?
Yeah, you really can't anticipate them because what it looks like on paper doesn't necessarily mean what it's going to translate to. Return of the Living Damned was unique in the sense that I wanted to put in a lot of work into that, and then so I spent just a shit ton of time farting around with graphics and stupid stuff for that pay-per-view, and then we ended up having a lot of really good RPs for several matches. And I mean, I don't want to say it was intended to be a placeholder pay-per-view because I thought it was going to be a pay-per-view where we just did some kind of different things, and everything just really kind of clicked, and then we ended up with the situation where we were going to have the Grand Slam title change. So I kind of like it. It was a thing where it's like you might not be expecting much, but then boom, here you got something, good out of it too. So it's great when it lines up like that. And obviously there are times you plan for everything is going to be big. But I mean, if you look at some of the Super Brawls historically, everybody's, that's my favorite pay-per-view, but a lot of times they've been pretty terrible pay-per-views. aside from the Super Brawl match. Now there have been some really good ones too, where people plan stuff out ahead of time, and so all your big matches kind of happen there. But there have also been times where it's a one match show. You know what I mean?
Right.
I feel like sometimes everything just kind of syncs up, and you end up with a nice overall show. And I think a lot of times it kind of depends on who's writing in it or who's writing the matches and how they're feeling. And so with Return of the Living Damned, I feel like everything was kind of working really well, and I was able to have some fun in some of the matches. And John wrote a fantastic match on there, and so we got everything just clicked. Sometimes that just works.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't really plan that too much. I mean, you can plan big matches, but you can't plan a perfect show.
Right. It's not like that's the difference between real wrestling and this. Like, you personally can have your guys in the EWA be the Big Show and Randy Orton, and you can write a fucking fantastic match that is back and forth and amazing. But to see the Big Show and Randy Orton in real life at Survivor Series, it's going to be a turd sandwich.
Yeah.
And there's nothing neither one of them can do to really save that and make it.
Big Show could do a moonsault and kill Randy
He
Orton.
could.
He could do a moonsault and kill Randy Orton. And
you want that?
That would be the best thing ever for me.
And that would make Randy Orton not usable in the EWA, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. Just cripple him. Just end his wrestling career.
He's not usable anyways because he's in the Hall of Fame.
That's true.
Is this a discussion you want to have right now?
Rex still owns. He still used him. He just recently used him. So.
It is. He came back. Whenever I retire Cody, I'm going to come back and use him once a year so no one can ever have him.
That's the way to do it. If you're smart, that's the way to do it.
And that's what I want to do. Going on the conversation we just had about pay-per-views, we have Super Brawl coming up right after Collision Course.
Yes.
The road to Super Brawl.
That's what
exciting.
That's what the logo of Collision. It's the road to Super Brawl.
That's catchy. Not even Steve could come up with something that great.
Yeah.
Do you have a good idea of what you want to do in the weeks leading up to Super Brawl, and personnel-wise, what you're looking at there?
Honestly, no, and I wish I had a better plan. It kind of snuck up on me a little bit. In a perfect world, I would make the Super Brawl series run from a month ago till the end of Collision Course, right? Because you really don't want it running during December, because we could announce those teams at the beginning of the month, and you could build stories the whole time.
Oh, you could tell a tremendous story.
Right. That would be the perfect way to do it. The problem is, unlike real wrestling, where maybe one guy would get injured between then and now, people are just dropping like flies, and I never know who I can depend on. So if I started the Super Brawl series at Return of the Living Damned, right, half the people wouldn't be here anymore, because we've had people go. Tomko was doing good, then he dropped out, now he's back.
That's the thing. Yeah, if you had started this, if Super Brawl was about 2.5 months ago, you could have probably fielded 5 teams of 4.
Right, but how many would who's going to be there starting in December is
exactly.
It becomes a real debate, and that's the problem with doing the Super Brawl series. I like to do that as like a round robin tournament, where you score points and all that stuff. And I think that's a fun idea, but it never really works great, and it can't work too far out because certain people just drop out, and that's frustrating. So I'm not sure what I'm doing this year. I'm not even sure if I'm going to do a Super Brawl series. I'm trying to come up with something that's going to work. And then I'm not really sure where we're at all, captains-wise, and who's coming back. I mean, we may run into a situation this year where if Steve is still tag champions, we're going to have a lopsided teams as far as membership goes. And that's nothing new, mind you, but it is new in the last couple of years. We've tried to work that out.
Right.
Where either the tag titles aren't part of it, or you've had 2 people being tag team champion and stuff, but we'll figure it out. We always do. If
you just would have made the right decision on Slam last week, this wouldn't have been a problem.
I know, and trust me, there's a little angel or a little devil sitting on my shoulder that says, Steve could screw this whole thing up. You just get the belts off of him, that problem would be solved.
Well, I don't want to
I never take the easy path. So.
Well, of course, it makes it more fun that way, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth as far as Super Brawl and the captains go, but I do want to talk about someone who's definitely in contention for that and the year they put together. And John stated from Super Brawl last year that this Super Brawl coming up would be Steve Carino's final Super Brawl.
Yeah. And it's a real shame he's not going to be featured on the show.
Yeah. Just going to go ahead and write him off. What's it like, in real-world wrestling, like in the real world of WWE and TNA and all that, when a storyline like this goes on, that person basically becomes the Incredible Hulk. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're completely unstoppable. But in the EFED sense, you have to treat that a little differently. So what has it been like to write the story going along for John and his matches? Now, granted, he's made it easy for you by winning a lot.
Well, that's what I was going to say. John's made it pretty easy in twofold. One, he always puts up a hell of an effort. So you got to get up early in the morning if you're going to beat John. Mm-hmm. And two, most of the people he ends up fighting end up flaking out. So
you crafty bastard, John.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he does, but like JD could have beat him. I mean, right, on JD's good days, he could beat John. It could happen. But he just kind of fell down a little bit or whatever and wasn't interested in it, and now he's gone. So he'll be back, I'm sure. But so, that was a situation where he could have lost a big match heading right into Super Brawl, and I thought, well, this could be interesting because Steen could really do some damage to him before his big Super Brawl exodus, but it didn't happen. So John has made it easy in that sense. I mean, I don't look at that and say, well, he can't lose because he's on his way out, right? I mean, he could lose them all up until Super Brawl, and of course that would be an interesting story too.
What a great year that would be! Just
well, yeah, he loses them all, but then maybe he wins the big one. I don't know. But he hasn't made it too awful hard. I don't love those sort of things where they're going to keep winning or whatever to get to a certain point. It makes it interesting in some regards, but then it kind of makes it, okay, he's not going to lose. It was like the Ric Flair retirement angle. To me, that was nowhere near as good as Kurt Hennig's retirement angle. He did a similar one in WCW. But we knew where Flair's was going to end at, right? You knew he was going to lose at WrestleMania, whereas the Hennig thing, you didn't know when he was going to lose, and then he lost a random night on Nitro, and it was like, oh, God, his career's over, Yeah. So that was more interesting to me. So, I mean, you got to kind of try to keep it interesting, and John has mostly made it pretty linear because he just kicks everybody's asses. And I think he knows that, too. He doesn't want to lose a bunch going into his final run, so he's not phoning it in, and
John certainly doesn't seem to be in the habit of losing. He's about the most model and consistent member you can have. In all honesty, he's probably the guy who reads every single show from start to finish, every single segment. He has positive feedback to say about every single little thing that goes on.
And he'll write matches, too. So
yeah.
Hey, I love it. We need more of it.
It'll be a shame he's not in Super Brawl.
Yeah, it's a shame he's going to end his career on a Fury because he can't get booked for Super Brawl.
And Fandango has beaten Carino.
What a way to go out.
Well, I think it'd be the only way to go out.
Oh, if you want to be memorable, I mean.
Yeah, you kind of touched on this earlier. I wanted to go back to it. CM Punk loses, disappears.
Right.
The Rock loses with Steve Carino, the Tag Team Championship, disappears.
Yeah, that was frustrating.
Eddie Kingston just recently loses the national title. I'm not going to say disappears because Will is still around, but he's taking a hiatus or break or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
How do you... Obviously frustrating, but what goes through your mind when stuff like that happens?
Well, it's different for each guy, but it can be pretty frustrating. I mean, to me, it's even more. It's like when TZ left, it wasn't as frustrating because there were other top guys that could come in, and in some respects, it was a relief in the sense that, and this happens with a lot. This is not just an exclusive to TZ thing. This happens with a lot of top guys. If they've been in that spot for a long time, somebody else comes in. Suddenly, we've got a lot of new stories to tell, And if they just kind of disappear on their own, then we don't have to run rematches, or we don't have to, they're not stuck trying to find something else to do. Now, the really good guys can lose a big match and then suddenly reinvent themselves and get right into another storyline.
I know what you're saying. Thank you. Thank you.
But it's really the most frustrating guys is the guys that I think are getting ready to be the next top guys. And this happened with Steen. This happened with Tomko. This happened with Kingston to an extent. I know he doesn't. He kind of knows where he wants to be at, so that's a little different. But it's very frustrating for me when I feel like this guy's getting ready to be elevated to the next level, and then they lose a big match, and then they're gone. And Tomko PM'd me and was like, well, or Shirley, whatever, said, you know what, when he come back, well, where can we go now? And I'm like, man, you totally dropped the ball, because we could have done so much with you in the last month that you're kind of starting back from ground zero, and it was like, that's frustrating. I'm sure frustrating for him, but frustrating for me too, because it felt like he was really coming into his own, and now he's stumbled a little, and he's looking to come back at that, and I think he probably will, but it's always upsetting when you see somebody losing. And then, and mentally in my mind, I've planned out, well, in a couple of months, this guy's going to be here, and he's going to, if we can get him a couple of good matches here, next thing you know, this guy could be. I totally had Steen penciled in for a title shot somewhere between the last couple of months and Super Brawl, and he kind of just disappeared during October. He did it another time, I think, during the summer, where he was kind of getting up, and then he kind of just disappeared. And then
I won't lie. Going into King of the Ring, I was like, this is Kevin Steen's to lose. Like, he's coming in off the heels of beating Brett, who was getting a title shot, and I was like, all you got to do is, I felt like all he had to do was just show up.
Right.
And he could have probably, I'm not saying that that's what he would have had to do, obviously, but I felt like if he came in with his quality of work, the momentum he was carrying through the summer, I was like, this guy has got it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with him, and that's not to bag on him, but there's been a couple of times, like I said, between a couple of months ago and now, I've said, at some point, Kevin Steen's going to get a title shot, whether it's a pay-per-view or not, it's going to be he's going to have a chance to really put all the momentum on his side, and it never seems to line up, because just when he's getting to that peak, he just, a valley comes out of nowhere. I don't know what happens. So,
well, he's there's so many mitigating factors. I know he's dating a girl long distance through like 3 states or whatever.
He should stop that.
Exactly. You should stop dating people, JD.
EWA should be your girlfriend.
Yes. We can all share. She's polygamous.
She gets around.
She gets around. We all love her.
I know that. Like I said, it's not the same as a regular, a real wrestling company would be. This guy's just dropping the ball or whatever. Stuff happens. But weird stuff happens. It's a Ryback guy. He was building momentum. And then he's just,
hey, my grandpa died. Be back in a month.
My grandpa died. Like, what? I'm pretty sure my grandpa died, and I just finished writing a slam. No offense to anybody. Look, of
course,
you take a day off, right? But I don't know how you need a month.
I don't think you need a month.
Maybe he was, living with his grandpa. I don't know. But
now,
strange.
Something happened recently as well to me that I want to talk about, and I'm sure that you'll take solace in the fact that you caused me some pain. Actually, it made me laugh, to be honest. I sent you a PM, and I said, hey, workload's kind of got me down. I want to go ahead and just write Vader off in this match against Kingston. And I was like, you can just have Kingston beat the shit out of him or whatever. And you're like, I'll take care of it. Well, the slave goes up, and Kingston beats Vader, and Vader rolls out of the ring, and in the action sequence, Vader says, well, I'm just a fat piece of shit. Guess I'll leave now. And that was the end of Vader.
What could be better than that?
Could you not just have, Kingston just beat the fuck out of him? Did he have to roll out of the ring and say, I'm just a fat piece of shit?
So, to me, that was perfect, because it has a reasoning. So years and years and years ago, when when Vader left the WWE, he had a match with Kane, and afterwards, this was his last match. After he loses, he rolls out of the ring, and as he's going by, you just hear him say, I'm just a fat piece of shit. So that's always stuck in my head, and I thought, well, if we're writing Vader out, that's how he'll leave EWA too. And then, and in real life, right, Vader leaves WWE and he goes to All Japan and has the best matches of his career. So I figure Vader has went and he's
absolutely
he's off doing something fantastic somewhere now.
I've taken Vader to Scott Murphy's Fed, and he's the world champ over there.
There you go. So
thank you for that.
So it works every time. Every time he leaves and he just says, "I'm a fat piece of shit," it works.
Now, do you get messages like that often? You're like, "Hey, I think it's time to write," or just people just stop using that character?
I wish more people would tell me they're going to stop using a character, even if it's a halfway decent character, because we could either, one, set them up with some kind of thing where they could come back and be used again, or if they know they're never going to use this guy again, but he's built up so much. I mean, like, let's take the myriad of characters that Ed has had, where he's built up a nice little winning streak, and then he's decided he's done with him, and we know it's because it's Ed, he's never going to use him again in any meaningful capacity. Then at least let's sacrifice that guy in some kind of angle that puts somebody else over. I mean, I would much rather you do that. Or
do you want to talk about Alberto Del Rio and King of the Ring? Do you want to go down that rabbit hole?
It's
that spot could have gone to someone else, right?
Right.
It's not. It doesn't bother me that he no-showed.
Right.
I get it. He was wrestling. He wrestled Green Ant. He was working all week. He didn't have a computer. He's living at his mom's with her laptop. Whatever, that's all fine and dandy. But couldn't he have just sent you a message and said, "Hey, I can't do it this week. If you can replace me, do it." He didn't even do that.
Right.
Like that. That's what bothered me, is that he didn't reach out and just say, "Hey, I can't do this."
That bothers me, and of course that is just the classic Ed. To the extent that when I was deciding whatever, I think he beat Jeff or whatever to get into that spot, but that was a really tight match. And it's one of those things where I have to take out that it's Ed, and I say, well, I think Alberto Del Rio won. But if I had been looking at it in a different way, I would have said, well, this is really tight, but it's Ed, so he's going to flake out. But I don't do that, and he, of course, he always accuses me of doing that. But so then he gets the premium spot, and he just, he flakes out. But even not even bagging on Ed there, just in general, like, if you've got a guy who has built up something and they just know they're done with him, man, I wish we could use them in a way that it puts somebody else over. And the flip side of that is if you've got somebody really good, let's write them out in a way that when they come back, it's a big deal, as opposed to you just say, well, I'm just going to stop RP as, let's just say Fuzz decides he's going to stop as DDP, and he just stops, and then he's gone for a couple months, but he does something else, and then when he finally decides to bring DDP back, he brings him back and he's directionless. But if we had been able to write him out in a clever way, whether it was he was going to go do something or somebody took him out or whatever, then when he comes back, he's immediately got a storyline, And so it makes more sense to me that if you know that you're going to be gone with somebody, whether you're completely getting rid of them or you're partially getting rid of them, let's try to find a way to do it in a compelling fashion that maximizes everybody else around you. I mean, I think that's just the way to do it. If you're going to go out, help somebody else or at least help yourself so that when you come back, you can be used in it.
Well, I tried that, and all I got was, I'm a fat piece of shit.
Yeah, I mean, but when he comes back, he'll be skinny. It'll be perfect.
Vader's back. He's
been on a diet. See, there's your storyline. He's been off dieting.
Atkins, he's now a member of...
You didn't do a lot with Vader, so I didn't think it was a huge...
I didn't. I was kind of just looking to stay around the Fury area, and then, I didn't mind using him as enhancement talent for other people. Like, I don't think Vader ever won, so, I was perfectly fine with that. But I was going, I knew that...
So my thought, we terribly misused Vader, much like the WWE had, so he left the same way.
Now, that whole idea and gimmick was just something that I thought up drunk on Skype with, Jazz and Brett one night.
Oh.
That being said, what goes through your mind whenever you read some role plays? Are you just like, wow, what is the person doing here? Do you ever think, this is really corny?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have gotten pretty good now where they do some pretty decent stuff. There are some people that do stuff, and I'm just mind-boggled. But I think people are kind of at a better place now where they do some pretty decent stuff. I used to get really irritated when people would post RPs and they would be wherever, a radio show, or they'd be...
Fuck you.
No, that's I know you just posted one on a radio show, or they'd be doing the Tonight Show or whatever. And didn't seem like they had ever watched The Tonight Show, you know what I mean? So it seemed very unrealistic, and so that would always irritate me when it was, it's like, if you're going to do something like that, do a little research for it.
Is that why we lost? Because I did a radio show?
Yeah, I hate those radio shows. No, I liked that.
I picked a radio show that was in the place where Slam was. I
liked the radio show. I didn't do the research, so I didn't know that was if that was a real thing or not, but it sounded terrible enough that it probably was a real thing. No, I liked that RP, actually. It was your other RP that lost you. It wasn't yours, but
I won't tell Kyle that.
He didn't hear that.
Editing. No, since I've turned Cody's face, I feel like half the stuff that I write is just like corny. But at the same time, I feel like that's the voice and like character that I have to use with this direction that I'm taking him right now.
You know, face characters are hard. I think it's way harder to be a face than it is a heel.
Absolutely.
Of course, it's really hard to be an effective heel because everybody's a heel. So in some regards, I think there's an advantage to being a face. But I did the face thing for a long time. It's very difficult not to be corny and hokey. But at the same time, if you're really smart about it, you don't have to go way out of your way to be a face. You just don't have to be spitting on people when you're a face. You know?
You just have to show a lot of respect for people and talk about.
You just have to be like a halfway decent human being, and then you're in the clear.
I'm just a quarter decent human being.
Yeah, so you're getting there. But I think the storylines. I like a good storyline that has some kind of relationship or something beyond just people or I've talked to somebody, random person at the airport or whatever. Like, it's nice if you can build around some another cast of characters that kind of become recurring characters. I don't like that when there's just a random, all of a sudden, this was one of my critiques of Brett's, if you want to get into the mind of me here, one of my critiques of Brett's thing at the last big title match he had was that it kind of all revolved around this cousin or something that we had never heard of before.
Right.
So it seemed very, to me,
like, why wasn't this his motivation before?
Well, right, and he played it like this has always been his motivation, and it was like, well, if this has always been his motivation, we've been following this guy 24/7 for a year or more. Why I haven't even heard this guy once before? So to me, that didn't work. So if you're going to do something like that, I think it has to be layered slowly within. And I think that's a good way to, especially if you're a face, if you've got some other interactions where you just, like I said, interact like a halfway decent human being as opposed to pushing down little kids or whatever it is that other people do in their RPs.
Yeah, now I almost, when Cody Rhodes was taking on CM Punk, and I don't want to bore people talking about the Cody Rhodes stuff, but I do want to say this. In the role play where I had Dusty Rhodes be in a car wreck, he was driving drunk, Cody went and saw him, blah, blah, blah,
right.
All that story. I came within an iota of having Dusty Rhodes die there. Now, how would that have been perceived by you?
I probably would have looked down on that because Dusty has been an integral part of the only, but when I read those, I was a little concerned that you were going to try to kill Dusty off. Only because Dusty has history here, and it wouldn't be out of the realm for somebody to try to use Dusty again. And obviously, there's other people that may use Dusty, that have a compelling argument to use Dusty. I mean, I guess there are other people that maybe could be killed off in an RP that you would say, well, nobody's ever reasonably going to use them. But I mean, if Goldust was ever around, he could make an argument that he might want to use Dusty at some point.
Well, that was kind of what went through. Like, I had him. I went back and forth on trying to kill off Dusty because I knew that it would tell a really compelling story and drive my story to the next level. But I was like, yeah. Like, what if someone came in with, Goldust and was like, Dusty Rhodes is his manager?
Right. I mean, of course, we've had so many, it only matters if you pay attention to it because, I mean, Lord knows we've had dozens of people do dozens of different things.
Does that bother you? Does the lack of continuity bother you in the EWA at times?
Yeah, it does. Some new people, I think it's good if they can come in and do their own thing, but at the same time, I like it, especially if there's somebody that has a lot of history. or has recent history, then you want to maybe just a little bit of acknowledgement of what the previous guy done. I mean, we've probably had so many Undertakers through the years that Paz did an Undertaker for like a week not that long ago. And he's done a couple of Undertakers. He probably can't even remember all his Undertakers, but
I think JD was the Undertaker.
Yeah, he was. I mean, literally, we've had thousands, probably more Undertakers than anybody, I would guess. Cause
that's such a hard side note. That's such a hard character to do. Like,
yeah,
I'm gonna kill you, and be like, no, you're not. There's your role play.
Right,
You're not gonna kill.
That's always that's the problem with any dark, demented sort of characters. After a while, everybody just no sells your scariness. But
yeah,
we've had some good Undertakers actually. But I say we've probably had the most of him just because he's never actually got into like a Hall of Fame status. Nobody's hung on to him long enough. But everybody always wants to play the Undertaker for a little bit, and. So in that sense, when the new Undertaker comes in, I don't really expect him to research what the other guy did, although I think at some point the Undertaker held the world title or something. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to come in and really play that up, I think that'd be great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If a new guy wants to do that. But it's impossible to have too much continuity because as soon as somebody signs up and does something stupid, then nobody's ever going to want that guy again. But, I mean, you take like Steve took Ziggler, and we had Ziggler was a nobody, and then he got adopted by Bick and them, and then we got a new Ziggler, and I tried to force that on them, and they didn't really want it. But then Steve was able to pick up on that after that Ziggler zigged out, and was able to use that and say, I used to be a nobody, and then Coulter come along, and and I fell under the spell of The Rock, but Coulter got me on the right direction and stuff. So that's an example of somebody really doing a good job of taking some previous history, even if it's not very much established, because Ziggler didn't have a whole lot there, and using it to an effective manner. So I love it when we can have that kind of continuity. But it's impossible as long.
Well, I mean, let's face it. It makes this place seem more realistic, for lack of a better term.
Right, and that's one of the things I know people complain about the Hall of Famers or whatever, but one of the reasons I like it is there is some continuity there in the sense that in this world, and that's why I've said this before, but in this world we can't have, it's not a big deal when Hulk Hogan shows up, because Hulk Hogan might show up a dozen times and be a flake. But if Randy Orton shows up, because he's a Hall of Famer and because it's the same guy or reasonably the same guy, I mean, I've said before that maybe somebody else could come in and play that storyline, but then it's like, this big Hall of Fame guy is here. And that's why I always say anybody that was going to handle them, even if we turned them over to somebody else, it would be somebody that had proven they were competent enough to do that. And I tried to be a little lax with that because I thought that Triple H guy was going to be able to do something, and Triple H has bounced in and out a couple of times. But, of course, he blew it. So that's why I'm always really protective of the Hall of Fame guys, because I think there is opportunity to present continuity there that's exclusive that you don't get anywhere else.
Yeah, that's understandable. And I see where people like Rex and the other people and Baz maybe are coming from. Like if after Super Brawl I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to just take a break, if not gone for a long time. And I came back in 4 months to say hi, and some guy was using Cody Rhodes with, like, the Fandango gimmick. I would just be like, is this really what's going on right now? Not saying that Cody would get Hall of Fame treatment or that you would just retire the character, but you know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean, especially if it's somebody you've put, years into or whatever. I mean, I think that's a little different. When I was, I did a little bit in the TNA Fed or whatever, and I come in and I picked up Mick Foley after somebody else had him. But I just kind of adopted what they had because I practiced what I preach, right? But but the other Foley wasn't particularly good, so I
was this Foley adopted by Linda McMahon?
No. But anyway, so I played tribute a little bit to what he had done and kind of played up my own thing or whatever, and then I was there for however long and I dominated. And anyway, then I left and I stopped back in at some point and I saw somebody else was doing a Foley, and they were just kind of doing the run-of-the-mill, what you would expect to be Foley. Of course, that Fed, he was still world champion, so who knows. But in my mind, I was like, look what they couldn't hold that guy for me,
Yeah.
in the good way.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't expect it too much because I And I had tried to even make a comeback there a couple of times, and they just were just like, whatever. So.
Do you still keep up with the TNA Fed?
No, I mean, that's the thing is I don't really keep up with it. And when this was probably maybe when I first took back over EWA, or maybe even before then, or maybe I'd already been taking over EWA for a while. I don't know. Anyway, at some point I went over there and I wanted to do something, and so they were in kind of dire straits because there's like 3 people there, and so I messaged whoever is in charge there. I can't ever tell, and I was like, well, I'm thinking about maybe coming back, doing something. Let's work something cool out. This could be a big deal, They should be thinking this is going to be something exciting. And the reception was just kind of like, oh, whatever. Or I pitched an angle, and they were like, oh, we can't fit you in. So, whatever. And that was it. And they did it. And
Jeff Jarrett hit you with a guitar.
Yeah, and it was like, all right, that's what it felt like. So I was like, okay, screw you guys. Enjoy your 4 people,
Yeah.
But I'm not bagging on anybody else. Kudos to them for still having the lights on.
Do you want to talk about the Fed where you, for lack of a better term, recruited the likes of Creston and Will?
Yeah, I mean, that Fed, me and Paz put that together, and I say me and Paz looped me into running a Fed, and then he did the typical Paz thing, which is quit after about 2 weeks. You haven't had a lot of interaction with him because he's never around.
No, I've never seen. He came back and wanted to be the Undertaker, and we're like, all right. And then
Paz is fantastic. He's a really great role player. He can write great matches, and he's just about the most undependable person on the planet. But at the time, he had been really dependable, and he come up with this idea, and he come up with this whole thing, and so whatever. And at the time, EWA was terrible, and we'd already been through a couple of dark years. And I felt like we had good role players in EWA. They just didn't have a great place to role play. But unlike every other Fed that's spawned off of EWA, we just kind of went and did our own thing, and we didn't actively recruit EWA guys. But whenever EWA guys quit, and then they would message me, oh, where are you playing at now? We could say, go here. Mm-hmm. And
that Fed's not still going, though, is
no,
it?
that Fed, it died on because I got tired. To be honest with you. But, we started running a little thin on roster members, but we had some really great people, and I got kind of burnt out of doing it, and it was a lot of work, and I think at some point I took over and I was running EWA and that Fed at the same time, and to try to produce the kind of quality of stuff that I want to do, it just gets tiring, and I think people were starting to get a little older, and so they were starting to kind of figure out other things. But that Fed's, the board's still active, so I went over there and I recruited Creston and Will and the guy that was Jake the Snake and a couple other people. And I've tried to get a couple other people on board. I messaged somebody trying to contact a couple of the other members, because what I really loved about that Fed is the most fantastic Fed in the sense that we probably had a half dozen female players, mm-hmm. And they were all good players, not just because you see a lot of Feds that have female players and they play weird characters, but we actually had legitimate female players that played good, solid characters. It's always like that, and it would have been great for the women's division over here if we could get that going on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't know that Brad Maddox and Vicky Guerrero were played by a girl.
Yes.
And anytime someone, when they were in the Oscars...
I wish she was still around. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was a huge Kristen fan. Great writer. I loved the voice that she gave Brad Maddox. Absolutely tremendous.
Yeah,
and,
she always did fantastic stuff in the PWE week. She was world champion and stuff there. I mean,
really
to the extent became kind of a strange Fed because we ended up with a lot of female players that were very good and wanted to do. We're too good to just be relegated to like a women's title or whatever. So we kind of just broke down the barriers and let them play for whatever because it's all a game anyway, right? But
do you know if Sable and Brock Lesnar is a girl?
I do not know. I wouldn't think so, but I haven't. I don't.
It's always so tough. Like I hate to assume that all I hate to assume that all people that play as female wrestlers are female, but
right.
It just seems like a logical assumption to make. You know?
I mean, I think with that one, it was where it was like, I thought that like Sable was just kind of there as the mouthpiece for Lesnar, and I think it just kind of took on a life of its own because that was the more interesting character, but I could be wrong with that.
Now, was that you that made that EWA official note on the...
Yeah, so I used to have an EWA official account, and Sir deleted it. And
you're shitting me. That happened?
No, and so we have this thing where we can get Zeta boards to bring it back, and we've asked them to bring back all these random accounts because Sir and I will remember these old account names from people that had years and years and years ago. And so I was like, well, can you bring? Because I was like, man, I know I had an EWA official announcement, and I think Sir just doesn't like that I have so many names. But to me, it's better to operate with things under names. I don't know. Sir and I have different philosophies on that. Anyway, so I said, well, I'll bring back this EWA official thing, and the Zeta boards people were like, you guys have to stop asking us to...
They said that?
Yeah, they were like, delete... Well, they said deleting a name should be a last resort, and I was like, tell Sir that. But... So I had to make a little note. I don't know if he saw it. I was like, Sir, don't delete my EWA official. But I've got like 4 or 5 names now. He probably hates it. But I feel like there should be
EWA official name has been changed to EWA absolutely official.
I feel like there should be a way that I can make a post that's not the Harry Smith because people think that has something to do with me, and that it would say, some kind of official business. So the idea is I'm trying to recruit some female, it doesn't even have to be female handlers, but just some women's, because we got to figure out what we're doing with the women's division. I really didn't want to keep it way early on. I wanted to immediately kill it with fire, and I was convinced to keep it. And we've had some good people bounce in and out, and I feel like if we kill it, it's going to be negative to the Fed, but we got to do something where we got to get some people playing in there. So I'm trying to recruit. Somebody signed up as somebody had a female manager or something. I thought they were going to do something, but they never did. So,
well, didn't Brady signed up inside of a quote?
Brady signed up twice. Like, I know I approved that guy once. Yeah, he was doing something with Ashley Massaro or whatever. So I'm hoping he's planning on joining the women's division. I mean, it's a good division.
It's a great division. I don't think I could write as a female character. I think that's just such a tough voice to master.
I think a lot of people get too caught up in thinking of it as writing something so differently. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I would think I've never really went after like the women's championship or something myself either.
Yeah.
But I wrote female characters, so that were extensions of my main characters or whatever. And so I feel like if you maybe just got out of it has to be so different. Why has it got to be that much different than if you were right as a dude? But I don't know. All I know is we need some women in there, or it's going to be trouble. And I don't really want to keep bouncing back and forth on whether it's going to be there and whether it's not. And I feel like we've got a couple of really solid players. Jeff will kill himself if I get rid of the women's division. So
yeah, we don't want that.
But at the same time, he doesn't really do anything in it. So
Jeff's our political consultant now.
Yes, well, he needs to get...
EWA finally has some pull.
We'll get some public funding for women wrestlers. Or just some women in here. But see, like Kristen, I think, found that hard because she had... she really wanted to play female characters, but, it didn't take her long to take over the women's division. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to tell her, kind of steer her the same way I was saying that I kind of thought Brock Lesnar was, is a sense of, well, just RP as Vicky Guerrero, but your character will be Brad Maddox. You know what I mean? She will be the voice of this guy who doesn't have a lot to say. And of course, she was able to, she could do fantastic. All her characters were always great. I was a big fan of hers, so bring her back.
Yeah, we kind of toyed with the idea back in August after the Rhodes Punk thing ended of doing some stuff with the Vegas Connection, but James was kind of on a little hiatus at that point, and then Kristen came back a bit, but then just couldn't really get anything going, and we wound up kind of dropping the ball on that, and that's probably more of my fault, and I hate the fact that the Entourage fell apart because...
Yeah, the Entourage just fell apart overnight.
It did, and, Kristen, magnificent person. I loved working with her. James, super supportive, great person. Steve came in and did some great stuff as the primetime players, and Mark Henry.
I don't think he did great stuff.
Listen here, you son of a bitch. Great stuff. That's before we even knew Darren Young was gay.
Yeah,
but Steve was writing him as a gay character.
Steve writes all his characters as gay characters.
Totally agree. All right, I don't want to cut this too short, but I do have a couple more questions. Obviously, we learned from your last podcast. Your personal information in life is your deal, and you pretty much don't give anything away from that. I do want to ask you, and you can kind of tread lightly with this answer. Aside from the EWA, what are some other things that you like in your personal free time, as far as like extracurricular activities or hobbies or sports or anything? I mean,
like long walks at the beach.
Yeah, it seems like sometimes from like the GIFs you post and the references you make, you know, like I think there's a little pop culture person inside there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's adequate, but I don't know that that's any more so than anybody else. I mean, you have to roll with the punches here. Sometimes I have no clue what the hell all those British people were talking about on the forums.
Yeah. Do you like sports at all?
Not really. I like pro wrestling, and yeah, that's about it. I followed MMA a little bit, but not much. And
do you watch every WWE pay-per-view?
No, no, I don't even really watch WWE. I mean, to be honest with you.
Do you watch TNA?
And I've gotten pretty bad where I don't even watch. I haven't watched anything right now.
Yeah.
I've been really busy as of late, but I mean,
what about TV shows? Do you watch like The Walking Dead or?
No,
Parks and Rec?
I used to watch. No, I've never watched Parks and Rec. I used to watch The Walking Dead, but they really lost me last season. It just bored the shit out of me, and I stopped watching.
It became less about the zombies and more about the people. I'm like, come on, you're in a fucking zombie.
Yeah, I mean, that show's already been pretty slow, and I'm sure I could get back on board, but I just kind of lost interest.
No, this season's been good so far, but it's not like, oh, you got to come back and see it. It's fucking great this season.
I mean, and like there's like at least 8. It seemed like last season was really long, but I could be wrong. But I watched several episodes, and then it seemed like there was just a ton more that was on my DVR for a long time, and finally I just deleted them, and I thought, well, if I ever decide to watch it again, I'll watch it, and if not, I don't. I don't watch a lot of shows. A lot of my shows are just over. Everything's ending.
If we were to get in your car with you right now, if you don't drive a bicycle, what CD would be in the CD player right now?
My car CD player. I don't really use a CD player.
All right, well, your iPod. What's on your iPod, then?
All kinds of strange things.
Fuck you! Answer the fucking question.
I don't know. I mean, just...
You like country music, don't you?
No, not really. I mean, I do have some Johnny Cash on there. Does that count?
Yeah.
That'll get me in with Brady, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I knew that you wouldn't give me a straight answer to this. You're so terrified of being found out.
I'm trying to give you good answers.
People don't care about you anymore.
I know.
You're yesterday's news. We have a Facebook group now, and you're not fucking in it.
I know. I want to get in that. I guess I got to get a Facebook account for you guys, huh?
Oh, my God. If you let us see you. I just want to picture you coming to, like, an EWA gathering. I know I've said this before, and just picture you off in the corner watching us all laugh and drink together, and you just, like, admire from far away and be like, that's mine. All of that right there.
It's all mine.
You'd be like, I made that. That's me over there. I'm so proud. And then like a single tear rolls down your cheek as you watch us just like hang out and have
part of that.
I want
mine,
to be
but I can never be a part of.
They could never know who I am. That's how I want to picture it.
That's how it will happen.
Obviously, yes. All right, well, it's been terrific having you here. I cannot thank you enough. It's always a pleasure to have you come on and answer stuff, and I know that the other members of the EWA universe always love hearing your answers about some stuff that they've wondered about, and it's always fun to pick your brain and see where you're coming from on things, because ultimately, like I said, we do look to you as, you know, the person in charge here.
Your idol.
Yeah, as our idol, and you know, you're the one we get mad at when the card doesn't get updated. You're the one we get mad at when you don't tell us where the fucking shows are. You know, there's so many trivial things that we shit on you about, but in all honesty, and I hope I speak for everyone whenever I say, you do a tremendous job at running this place, and I know I've said that I love the community aspect here, and I love the EWA. I love the level of competition. I love working with the people here. This has been a major treat for me in the last year and a half, and I'm very happy that this is the Fed that I found and wound up sticking with.
We're better off for having you here. So.
Well, I appreciate that.
Because everybody else has quit, so it's down to you, Greg.
War by attrition. I'm going to win that title somehow, man. Have to make everybody else quit. But, it's been a pleasure. All mine. Big part of EWA Podcast Week. The road to Super Brawl
EWA
starts
Podcast.
after.
Don't miss it.
That's right. Starts after Collision Course. Any last words you have for anyone?
No, just
good enough.
Stay cool, my babies.
Thanks, Brady or Newt, and we'll see you next time we see you guys. Thanks for listening.